Never sleep again.
Are you afraid of the things that go bump in the night? Do you feel like a zombie after a long night of tossing and turning? Well, then try Dream from LifeWise. Just one tab daily before bed will leave you feeling rested and refreshed every morning. That's right, Dream from LifeWise. Just one simple tab placed on your tongue, it dissolves and let you drift into dreamland. Text Moose Dream to 754-600-9473 to get you started with your free samples today.
I'm Dick Warlock, Michael Myers from Halloween 2.
You're listening to Moose's Monster Mash. Welcome, horror hounds, to an all-new episode of Moose's Monster Mash. I'm your host, Moose, and today's an anniversary episode. We're going to talk about one of my favorite movies. It's having a birthday this month. It turns 70, and we're also going to talk about the man behind that movie. But before we get into that, let me introduce the person that's going to help me discuss that. And, you know him. He's been here a lot. Please welcome back Mr. Billy Peck.
Well, hello. I am back.
Hello.
And we're here to talk about, they've got to see it in the episode description by this point.
Oh, yeah.
We're here to talk about Ed Wood.
Ed Wood and Bride of the Monster.
Yeah. Yeah, specifically Bride of the Monster. And then, like you said, maybe a little extra Ed Wood discussion. But yeah, 70 years of Ed Wood's Bride of the Monster.
And, little extra, anniversary, 20 years ago, it was included in Devil's Rejects.
Oh, interesting.
It was playing on the TV.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting.
So,
nice little...
Just interesting how it all lined up.
Yeah, for sure.
So, it's funny. Whenever I'm looking at, like, an actor or director or somebody, I always go to their, like, biography, right?
Yeah.
And Ed Wood probably has, like, the roughest biography on IMDb I've ever read in my life.
Well, yeah, between stuff he directed or just wrote, there's a lot of not so great in there.
Well, it's I in preparation for this, I went through and I watched as much of his stuff, rewatched as much of his stuff as I could.
Mm-hmm.
And I think where you can find a kernel of good is if you took his movies and put them on a stage, they would be phenomenal because his sets were very stage play. And I think this is why I like the majority of his work, because as movies, they are terrible. But if you're looking at it from like a stage production,
Yeah.
it's really good. I mean, and we'll get more into it with Bride of the Monster, but that one specifically, it was very much a stage set. It wasn't a movie set. It was, something
Bride
you'd
of the
see
Monster.
it was something you'd see in like a theater setting.
Sure.
And I think that's kind of where he thrived, was that like theater setting, and he just he didn't know how to transfer it over to movie.
Sure.
And like with his biography, like the first sentence is "hacks are nothing new in Hollywood." It's like, oh, damn.
Yeah. No, it's Ed Wood is fascinating, interesting. It seemed like a guy who had a lot of love for filmmaking and thinking, that he wanted to do something great. But like you said, the translation just wasn't necessarily always there, it's almost like, maybe a mix of delusional or you always hear about like when your friend does karaoke and everyone's like, "You're a great singer. You should go out for American Idol." And then you're lucky enough to actually make it there for auditioning purposes, and then they go, "You're you had too many people tell you you were really good at this, but they weren't looking at it objectively. They were looking at it as a friend and going, "Oh yeah, you're great." And you're just not actually cut out for it. That's and maybe that's mean, it's a shame, but at the same time, like it's just kind of the way it goes sometimes. People aren't meant to be able to do everything they want to do. They're not always meant to follow their dreams, and that can suck. But sometimes it's an unfortunate reality, and it's like he just didn't quite have I don't know, the vision to properly convey it to being quality.
Well, and we talked about this, well, I mentioned it a little bit before we started recording. It's, you go back, you look through his entire career, and he has this list of like unrealized projects. It's almost as long as his realized projects. And he's very much an ideas guy. And I mean, we see it all the time in, the circles we rotate in, whether it's, wrestling or music or, podcasting or anything. There's always the ideas guy. And, I'm definitely guilty of it. But you have to know when to, reel it in, or have somebody like you to tell you when to reel it in.
Sure.
And like you said, he didn't have that. He just had money and the ability to go take his ideas and, for the good or the bad, make them.
Well,
and
and like even the money thing was, like this is almost where it's like the good used car salesman, his pitch to a small independent company who isn't really thriving on their own goes, "Oh, wow, he's got great ideas. This could be the thing that makes me money." So they give him the little bit of money that they have, and or these investors come in or whatever. But he just doesn't quite have said the proper way to translate it. It's big ideas, but it's not fully fleshed out.
Say he definitely had the go big or go home mentality.
Yes. Because like I think there's a difference. You can say that there's some similarity between like Ed Wood and like Tommy Wiseau, who did The Room. Famously a really, really poorly put together film. And Tommy Wiseau had no idea what he was doing. And when he finally had his big premiere of The Room and everybody's laughing at it and all this stuff, like he thought he was making this really meaningful masterpiece and everyone was laughing at it. And then he's kind of switched his narrative to like, "Oh yeah, I was trying to put out this weird, goofy movie." Like, no, you weren't. But he just didn't have what it took to properly put out a good movie. But here's where the difference is like Lloyd Kaufman, Trauma. He purposely is making lower budget schlocky movies.
So he's doing schlock for schlock's sake.
But I firmly believe that if Lloyd Kaufman had a good budget and a great idea to do not something schlocky, like a real movie with great production and story and all of that, that he could do that.
Well, he's even shown it in his film. I mean, put Toxic Avenger against a couple of the I don't know if you've seen it, but put Toxic Avenger against #Shakespeare Shitstorm. It's 1,000% less schlocky than Shitstorm, but it still falls under, it is very much a trauma film.
Sure.
And I mean,
Well,
he
and
definitely
say
has, he has the eye that Wood didn't. But
right.
it's funny because Wood was the ironic schlockmaster before.
Well, and that's what I'm getting at. Like Lloyd Kaufman purposely squished a watermelon instead of a head. But if he had a really good budget and had a realistic looking head made, he would do a great job in that filmmaking. If you gave all those tools to Ed Wood, I don't think he would be able to pull it off.
It
That's
would
all I'm getting to.
it would still be Gallagher with a hammer.
Right. But, it's this is the the yin and the yang of Ed Wood. We You have to be rational and realize he's not the best filmmaker. But sometimes that does bring a charm to the film and the story and the look and the aesthetic and everything of the thing that he made. And there's something that we enjoy about it.
I mean, yeah, some of his films are just brutal, but there are others, that do have that B movie charm
Yes.
and have found their way into the hearts of horror and sci-fi fans, with
100%.
And it's, I think, I've mentioned it on here before. Like, I really like self-aware campy movies, and I know Ed Wood wasn't doing this.
Right.
I think at this point, people do it like that should be a style, the Ed Wood style. But
Sure.
it's the wires on the spaceship and
Yeah.
all that, and watching like Plan 9, you see all this stuff and you're like, oh, that's fun, and then you look back and it had like a $60,000 budget and you're like, oh shit, why are there wires? But honestly, it's the little things like that make his movies fun for me.
Yeah.
Because it's a nice departure from the ordinary. He is
for sure.
he is so like off kilter.
Mhm.
And yes, they are terrible, but at this point they're terrible in a fun way.
Well, right. And that's the thing. It's like, when you become like a horror sci-fi fan, growing up, and you're, just speaking for our generation, and we are seeing movies like Candyman, or we do go, a couple decades earlier and we find Halloween or whatever, and I'm talking like some of the masterpiece staples, and but like we become like these fans that like seek out all of this stuff, and then like you do see like the real late night, staying up past bedtime watching cheap black and white movies. And yes, and you start seeing those films, and it's the term so bad it's good, and you're watching some of these, and some of them you're going, oh, this is real bad. Some of them you're going, this is bad, but it's hilarious, and you just laugh at it and you have a great time. I feel like Ed Wood was the best version of so bad it's good.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they could have done an entire season of Mystery Science Theater on Ed Wood.
Yeah.
And the ratings would have been phenomenal. And it's definitely a genre of film that's fun to add your own commentary to.
Sure.
So, whether it's riff tracks or you're just adding, your own 2 cents to what you think could be done better, or, just going through and pointing out the mistakes, like in a drinking game sort of style. It's definitely, his works definitely lend themselves to viewer participation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's always a plus.
Yeah.
Yeah, he went from low budget horror to porn.
Well, right. That was the other thing is like, look, I am like an Ed Wood fan, but also like I wouldn't call myself extremely well versed in the topic and all of the the other things that he's done. Obviously, like I know that he got into this even low grade version of porn, basically, and like I guess I don't know exactly where that comes from. Maybe it's a thing of he's exhausted his resources of going to quote unquote real film studios to get budgets and make films, and like maybe this is the only thing that he can make and he still loves the idea of cinema. Yeah, or who knows, I don't know exactly where that comes from, but yeah, that's pretty much what he moved into.
Well, like it wasn't even just uh, films. He was writing novels too,
Sure.
and you kind of feel bad for the guy at the end of his life because he was making pretty good money writing those basically smut novels,
Hmm.
almost $1,000 a novel,
Okay.
and he was like cranking them out. But then, due to his own personal demons, he would blow the money,
Hmm.
which is why he died pretty much penniless. And there was one of his friends had said after he died, he's like, there was a quote. He's like, "My God, I've given everything away. I should be a millionaire."
Yeah.
And yeah, he with just the novels alone, he should have been well off. But due to his own addictions,
Yeah.
he lost it all, and
Hmm.
that's he finally found something. He found something that he was good at, and people were paying good money for, and he drank it all away.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a way to
Yeah.
go out.
Yeah. Um, yeah, it's interesting, when we you start to break down the career and the unfortunate, there's a lot more misses than hits. Um, that's why, like, and I know that it's something that we'll move into. Maybe it's now, I don't know what your plans are, but um the Tim Burton film Ed Wood, starring Johnny Depp. Like, it does a great job romanticizing the lore of Ed Wood. Not that it doesn't show like problems that he went through and whatever, but like, the movie starts, he's this struggling um playwright and director and working in the theater and working in these crappy theaters with leaks and stuff, and he wants to do Hollywood films, and he goes through all the trials and tribulations, but the story just keeps going up and up and up and up and up, and then he has his big, yes, Plan 9 from Outer Space is a hit, and like it makes it seem like this happy ending, but that's where that story ends. Where does it go in real life after that? Not very great.
Yeah, say the movie is definitely the Hollywood version of his story, and it's definitely the Hollywood ending that he would have preferred.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's and God, we see this a lot too, and especially nowadays when they're doing like biopics and things. It's you get the highly romanticized version of somebody's life,
Mhm.
and if anybody's life needed a pick me up, I think it was Ed Wood's.
Well, and I mean, here's the thing, like, even before that movie came out, he was known as the worst filmmaker in Hollywood. Like, I know not everything is, again, a common term, sunshine and rainbows, but like, why not, put out the feel good story of the accomplishments, giving Bela Lugosi a second career. I mean, Bela was doing films basically nonstop. He never really quit, but none of them were like anything to write home about.
No, and I mean the one we're going to be talking about was his last speaking role.
Right.
So and yes, there's there is a lot of controversy between Bela and Wood's relationship. Did he exploit him? Were they actually friends? Not for me to say. I wasn't there.
Right.
And the further you read into it, you could go either way on it. It's not a call I'm here to make.
I mean, sure. But again, like, this is all, theoretical, I suppose. But again, like, if we were to go through Bela's IMDb right now and look at all the movies he was making before then and after, and we're talking like after Dracula, after his popularity, there's no way he's making like great money or anything on these movies. So, like, at what point is Ed Wood exploiting him, taking advantage of him? Is he not paying him at all? You know?
Yeah, it's
Um,
I think the first movie that he approached him for, I don't remember which one it was. He offered him like $500 for,
mhm.
and Baelish just flat out said no.
Yeah.
And then came back a little bit later and was like, "Okay, I'll do it." It's because
Well, that would have been Glenn or Glenda.
yeah, that's what it was. Because like you said, he wasn't doing anything, and I think where the exploitation comes in was he was like Bela was super drugged out when he filmed the in that footage they used for Plan 9. But
Yeah.
that was before he went into rehab. And I don't think that was so much, he's taking advantage of Bela. It was Bela said, let's shoot. And he said, okay, fine, we'll shoot.
Right.
And then, what are you going to do? Not use the like last footage of this like iconic actor? I mean,
Yeah.
it's something that people are going to debate from, here to eternity is were they actually friends? Were they, was he exploiting his popularity? And ultimately they helped each other. That's my take. They helped each other.
Yep.
Good or bad, they helped each other. And in the process, gave me one of my favorite movies, Bride of the Monster.
There you go. Um, not that it is, specifically like from the movie related, but to give, a little bit, of like my fandom for it. Um, I, for, a lot of listeners that are aware of me, have listened to me on previous episodes, you would know that I'm a musician. And for a period of time, a friend and I, that Scott Armstrong, had been playing in different bands, and we would always play shows together. Our two bands were on the same bill a lot, and we became pretty good friends. And we had this idea. One of the funnest shows that we did every year was a Halloween show every year for, man, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, or maybe a little more than that. I don't remember exactly, but for a number of years, our bands were always on these Halloween shows. And we thought it would be fun for one year, that him and I would put a band together to headline the show. And we were in original bands. We made our own music. But how fun would it be if we put a cover band together playing horror themed songs? So we played Rob Zombie, Alice Cooper, Ozzy, Kiss, Marilyn Manson, all this type of stuff that was just a lot of fun for this once a year, or one time. We were doing it one time, and people loved it so much that we did it for a few more years after that. And then it just kind of came to its end. But all of that context to lead up to saying we called the band Bride of the Monster. And it was because of our love for schlocky horror and Ed Wood and all of that. So yeah, I played in a band for a while called Bride of the Monster. Um, so yeah, again, I guess that's a little bit of,
A little bit of the fandom
what the film,
seeping out.
huh?
A little bit of the fandom seeping out.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Well, and you get to see a lot of Wood's fandom for Lugosi seep out in this film too, because you have Lugosi playing this scientist who has hypnotic powers, and there are a couple scenes that are very, very direct shots from White Zombie when he's trying to hypnotize the people. And it's very much the throwback to his portrayal from White Zombie.
Mm-hmm.
And, same pose, same zoom in on the eyes with, same lighting cues, same everything. And, that has nothing to do with Wood being a good director. That has everything to do with him being a fan of
Yes.
Bela.
Yeah, for
and
sure.
Bela's work, because that was definitely if you're going to be, a hypnotist, why don't we just pull this? It worked so well the first time. Let's do it again.
Mm-hmm.
But no, what started to really work with like Bride of the Monster, Plan 9, and the movies that did work was, and this kind of goes back with my, he had the theater thing. He had this like troupe of actors that he used, and they knew him, he knew them, they worked well together. And you have Bela, you have Tor Johnson, Loretta King worked in a couple films for him, The Amazing Griswold, not in this one, but multiple films. And Tor in this is phenomenal.
He is, actually. Yeah. It's funny, rewatching it, and again, I think there's a potential we'll go back to it a few times, but like for a lot of us, when we think of Ed Wood in those movies, we think about the scenes from the Tim Burton film. And while I think it does a good job of painting the picture of everything surrounding it, not everything is entirely accurate. And so watching the real Tor Johnson, but having, I suppose that almost not preconceived, but post-conceived notion of George the Animal Steel playing Tor Johnson, they play him kind of like an idiot.
I say this very comedic take on what is this big, gentle giant, just sweetheart of a man.
And when you watch George the Animal Steel do it, like it's just this slightly more exaggerated version, which again, like makes it feel like kind of dumb, kind of like not good acting. Watching him, the actual Tor Johnson in the actual Bride of the Monster, it doesn't feel quite like that. It feels like good and menacing and heart, and all of this.
Yeah, Tor takes you on a roller coaster of emotions through that movie. It's you can see when he's supposed to be the enforcer, and you feel that, and then when he makes that shift later of turning on the master, and he shows the more humane side, and he's getting beaten, and you start to, you feel for the monster, and it's that very much that, old horror trope of, okay, you're going to feel for the monster. And the way he portrays it, you really do, because Tor really laid into Lobo, and, his, basically like his abuse scenes and you wanted to see him triumph and overthrow his master and the people that were rooting against him.
Yeah.
It was God, it was awesome. And I'm looking at a picture of him choking out Bela at the end, and
Yeah.
it reminded me what I was saying earlier about the sets. It was very much a theatrical set. Like if you look at the castle wall, or the dungeon wall rather,
Mm-hmm.
is very much that flat like brick paintwork that you'd see on like a play, with very minimal, okay, what can we find to put in that looks like it's a science lab?
Yeah.
And it has all the charm of the theater, and it just, his sets always jump out at me for that. I think for me, it's because I like building sets, and I think that's why that resonates with me the most. But it's,
Mm-hmm.
that part always makes me happy a little bit, because it's like, oh, it's not, for a movie that had a $70,000 budget, it didn't go to sets, it didn't go to locations either, because it was like maybe 2 locations,
Mm-hmm.
and we know it didn't go to special effects. So I would love to see what the $70,000 went to for this movie.
Yeah.
And we were doing the math. The $70,000 and 55 is almost $830,000 today. That's $300,000 more dollars than it costs to make Terrifier. Not Terrifier, All Hallows Eve.
The lead up to
Yeah.
Terrifier.
And I mean, it goes to show you, what you can do with, even with a low budget, but a solid vision. You have to have that solid vision to make it pan out,
Yeah.
or you got nothing. Because, I mean, conversely, 20 years prior to Bride of the Monster, Bride of Frankenstein was made for almost $400,000.
Yeah.
11.4 million in today's money. Like, big budget studio film.
Yes.
Which is funny, because you go back and you watch it and you don't see it. Like, it doesn't, I mean, it doesn't come across as like a big budget film.
But like they're in a real castle.
Yeah,
and
I say, but then you consider, the shooting locations and some of the special effects, and it's like, okay, you can see where that budget went. That goes back to my point of, where did this $70,000 go? You had $70,000 to make this movie. What'd you spend it on? No way it all went to that octopus.
Yeah.
A couple thousand each leg. I don't know.
Well, and it's hard to say too. I mean, like renting things, in Hollywood from studios, location space, whatever. Like it does cost. It's hard to say.
And it's funny. So this movie was made as a Cold War, like, not awareness, but like exploitation film, basically, just to ramp up the propaganda. That's the word. Cold War propaganda. And like they deliberately left the Bela's character, Voronoff's country of origin out there, but they made sure it was very European. It could be Nazi Germany, it could be Soviet Union, and
sure,
they even allude to the master race, and it's like, oh, okay, it's interesting writing, and it was one of those things that, here you go back, you're watching this movie from 70 years ago, and they left it so ambiguous that you could he's either German or he's Russian. You don't know. And it's going to rile somebody up.
Yeah.
It's insane to think that it works that well. And fast forward 70 years, and, well, you're either going to get riled up over a Nazi or a Russian. So,
yeah.
But, it was, the movie was originally called Bride of the Atom.
Yes.
And which I almost kind of prefer, because Bride of the Monster, who's the monster? That's kind of the takeaway from the movie. Is it the doctor? Is it Lobo?
Hmm.
Is it the octopus? Is it the people? I mean,
Yeah.
there's four possibilities, and that's actually one of my favorite takeaways from this movie. Is there's really no, much like the background of Vornoff, it's left ambiguous. Who's the monster? You decide.
Right.
I mean, they each have monstrous qualities.
Yeah. But that potentially could be giving Ed Wood a little too much credit that he
I
put that much deep thought
absolutely,
into it.
no, absolutely,
So who was the bride of the atom, you know?
yeah, it is more than likely her and him, but it's a nice takeaway is just like, all right, who's the monster?
Sure. Yeah, I mean it in hindsight it ends up working out like in its favor.
Oh yeah, and
You know, and
I think that's one of
if
the things that
it's
helps this movie thrive all these years later. Basically, in spite of itself,
yeah,
it gives you things to think about, and it's funny because, like you said, he never meant for it. He just went and made a movie.
right. Well, and if the story's true that like it was Bride of the Atom and then like the studio or a investor or something like changed it to Bride of the Monster and he's like, what? That's not it's not and then he just kind of goes, well, okay, and just who comes to the title and is fine with it. But like I said, if that story's true, like he didn't even change the name to Bride of the Monster. Or was it that they put it out as Bride of the Atom and it did really poorly? And then they're like, well, maybe a name change will get
So I
more
think it
people
was the test
interested.
audiences did.
That might be what it was. But still, like, none of this was like his plan.
No, it definitely wasn't a this master. All right, we're gonna do this, and that's the route we're gonna go with it. It happened.
Right.
And yeah, so the producer had strongly disagreed with the use of nukes and only agreed to
Oh,
finance the
yeah.
film if Wood rewrote the original script and made it end with like a nuclear explosion as a warning against the use of nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
But no, this movie ended up being the only movie that he actually made any sort of profit on, and the last movie that Lugosi had a speaking role in. And it's funny. So there was, he has this big speech in the movie, and they were concerned about his memory for it. So they had the prop master hold up these cue cards to help him with the speech.
Yeah.
Never once looked at the cue cards. When he called
Good.
cut, like the whole crew applauded and everything. So I thought that was really cool. And then, yeah, Bela checked himself into rehab right after this movie was done filming. But that's Bride of the Monster.
Yep.
One of my favorite B movies. 70 years old this month.
Yeah.
That is insane.
Yeah, don't definitely a fan of it. Said and just Ed Wood in general. And admittedly, like I said earlier, sometimes it's more the idea of Ed Wood and what he put out. And like I do like legitimately like going back and watching some of those movies. Um and but I I do also love, the Tim Burton film a lot. Um, and not completely similar, but in a somewhat similar way. Like when you look at the filmography of Tim Burton, most people don't, and we're talking general audiences, don't even know that Ed Wood is a movie of his. Um, you know, and you look at its cast, with obviously, Johnny Depp, um, Bill Murray at the time, Jeff Jones, big deal, Patricia Arquette, Sarah Jessica Parker. Like what an incredible cast.
So it is very much a 90s movie. Like it pulled like the top stars of the 90s, and they're all there.
Right. And it's often forgot about or not even known it exists. And I mean, one of only two movies of Tim Burton's that Danny Elfman didn't score. Um, it's such on its own, such an interesting movie that kind of itself fits into Ed Wood's lore too. It's this often not cared about, forgotten movie. On the other hand, though, I think it's a really greatly made film, and it's up there as like legit like a top favorite of mine, and like as far as Tim Burton films, like at the tippy top. um but I I think it's a combination of thoughts. It's unfair to look at Ed Wood's career solely based on that film. It's unfair not to include discussing the film, uh because it does such a good job of more than anything, I think, getting the point across Ed Wood's love for filmmaking, good or bad. So where things are maybe, embellished or, made up to push a narrative or whatever, I think it captures the heart of what Ed Wood was attempting to do all those years prior. So, yeah, Ed Wood's cool.
Yeah, he's definitely in a league of his own, and we're all the better for it. And I mean, I don't know if it's still active. It was active a year ago. There was even a church for Ed Wood.
Really?
Yeah, there was an Ed Wood church out of, I believe, Oklahoma. And they would celebrate Woodmas every October 10th.
Interesting. Okay.
On Ed Wood's birthday. This guy got himself ordained and would celebrate, he had the Church of Ed Wood.
Okay. I like it.
And there are film festivals not festivals, there are film schools that have now basically have you make Ed Wood style films.
Okay.
And, you turn them all in as basically your senior project, and the best one wins and gets shown at the end of the year or whatever. So he definitely left his mark on cinema.
Absolutely.
And for somebody that was labeled the worst director in history, he sure has a lasting legacy.
Yeah.
And that's a hell of a takeaway.
Yeah.
So what all do you got coming up?
Oh boy. Everything that I've got coming up, this really mostly comes down to if you are in the Omaha, Nebraska and surrounding cities area, lot of wrestling throughout the month of June 2025 if you're listening to this currently. Lot of wrestling.
June and early July.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I would just say look up PWP Live, look up Next Level Wrestling. And those are the things that I've got coming up as of late. Some Secret Weapon shows coming up. My current cover band doing 80s stuff.
Just celebrated 20 years.
So, yeah, that's some of the things going on for me. That's pretty much it.
And if you're not in the Omaha area and you want to check out some of that wrestling, just go to patreon.com/PWP Live.
Mm-hmm.
Those links will be in the episode description. And you can be sure to follow me on Facebook at Moose's Monster Mash or YouTube at Moose Media Inc. And in the comments, tell me what you think about Ed Wood, his movies, or, the movie Ed Wood. And Billy, you'll be back. We haven't set a date, but we've set the episode.
Yes.
And horror fans, I think you're going to like his next appearance. And so, thanks for coming on and helping me celebrate the birthday of Bride of the Monster and Ed Wood. And,
Yeah, of course.
it's always a blast. And until next time, Horror Hounds, mash on.
This has been Moose's Monster Mash. Come back for more chills and thrills if you dare.